important are words in learning any language? Have you ever given a thought to it? Hi, this is Dr. Shireen Sheikh, and today we're going to talk about how important are words in language learning. Well, in learning any language, four constituents are considered important. They are sound, structure, meaning, and words, or rather I call it vocabulary. All these constituents hold an equal place of importance, but viewed in the right perspective as an important feature of language abilities, vocabulary is definitely a major consideration. Words are important because everyone uses them, no matter who you are or what subject you are speaking on. Whether you are drafting a letter, or writing a poem, or writing a research paper on the experiment that you have conducted, words will always play a crucial role. Words are important because it is required in any verbal communication. They dictate how we speak, how we communicate and express ourselves. They express the ideas that we have in our mind. Even if one wants to frame a few sentences, one needs a stock of vocabulary. Our efficiency in using any language depends on the number of words we know in that language. The more words we know, the more competent we are in the use of language. But if we know only a few words, we are likely to manage with the words we know, and that may lead to using inappropriate words or using more words to convey the same meaning. Words are tools to communicate with others as well as explore and analyze the world around us. Learning new words expands our understanding and improves our mind. Every new word that is learned entices our mind to stretch itself into new areas. We can improve our ability to think and express ourselves if we have a larger vocabulary. Our thinking becomes more fluid and supple, and we understand the world better with a larger vocabulary. In the modern world, the ability to use words effectively is often highly rewarded. A person with adequate knowledge of vocabulary can understand the exact meaning of what he hears and reads, and so there is no misunderstanding on his part. Adequate knowledge of vocabulary allows one to speak and write easily and fluently. It makes his speech and writing more interesting, vivid, exact, and effective. It enables him to adopt the correct tone to suit the audience as well as the purpose. It gives pleasure to the audience. It gives him a range of precise words to use in formal writing such as letters, reports, summaries, and essays. It also enables him to impart shades of meaning and color which are particularly useful in creative or narrative writing. Words embody concepts. Therefore, learning or teaching a word is learning or teaching a concept. Most of us are not aware of this principle. It is time that we should change our approach to teaching and learning of vocabulary. Vocabulary development is concept development, and greater the number of concepts we acquire, the greater the variety of ideas we can understand and express. Generally, expansion of vocabulary accompanies an expression of thought. A learner needs adequate words in order to describe and internalize his environment. The words he knows influences his perception and conception of his surroundings. Inadequate vocabulary results in inadequate conceptualization and inability to connect to concrete concepts. This shows that vocabulary teaching and learning plays a pivotal role in the learner's conceptual development. In the initial stages, more attention is needed to the grammatical and phonological accuracy, so vocabulary may be restricted to a few words for beginners. But in higher classes, or at intermediate level, it is important to expand the learner's vocabulary. The learners at the intermediate level are in a better position to enrich the vocabulary because at this level the learners know the sound system, the sentence pattern, and the common words reasonably well. It is also the right time to create word consciousness among the learners. At this level, the learners feel a strong need to enlarge the vocabulary as they are expected to express the ideas more effectively. It must be pointed out that limited knowledge of vocabulary can prove to be a major handicap in the progress of education. The most obvious effect of underdeveloped vocabulary can be seen in poor reading comprehensions as the learners struggle to extract the meaning from reading passages. In order to learn a language, the learners should be able to understand what they hear and read. In other words, the input must be comprehensible to the learners. Vocabulary as an aspect of language is different from other aspects of language such as phonology and syntax. For example, vocabulary as a component of language is more open-ended than phonology and syntax because additions, deletions, and other changes to this stock are easily possible. In the process of language acquisition, the acquisition of phonological and syntactic aspects of language almost ceases after a certain period. But the process of vocabulary acquisition continues throughout the lifetime of an individual. Therefore, it is necessary to deal with factors that influence vocabulary growth of an individual. Some of the factors that influence the vocabulary growth are: number 1, experience and exposure. Vocabulary composition of the speaker of a language may reflect the non-linguistic aspects of the speaker's life. The speaker's experience and exposure determine the quality and quantity of his vocabulary. For example, if a person has wide experience and is exposed to many situations or circumstances, he has a wider and a deeper knowledge of vocabulary than the other person who has only limited experience and limited exposure. The second factor is education. The total vocabulary of an educated speaker of language is generally more than that of an uneducated person. The quantum and the type of education that one receives is reflected in the quantity and the quality of the vocabulary of a person. Education opens new avenues for the learners to seek more information and thus causes an increase in the person's vocabulary. The third factor is the socio-economic grouping. There are vocabulary differences among the speakers of language depending upon the socio-economic background. Speakers belonging to different socio-economic classes have different linguistic and conceptual situations. A speaker belonging to a socially higher and economically more affluent section may have a wide variety of words that go beyond the immediate necessity, as there are a variety of concepts used by these people. But a culturally deprived speaker may not have adequate vocabulary to conduct his business. The next factor is dialect. The dialect of a speaker is an important factor. The vocabulary of a speaker of a non-standard dialect contains features and vocabulary different from the standard dialect. The non-standard dialect speakers also differ from each other in quantum of vocabulary. For example, if we observe the farmers in Maharashtra belonging to different areas of the state, we find that the vocabulary differs from each other in quantity as well as quality. The speaker of a standard dialect has a richer vocabulary because it is used in wider context than a non-standard dialect. Age is another factor that influences vocabulary growth. The vocabulary of a child goes on increasing as his age increases. But the increase in the speed of acquisition is not the same throughout the life. At some point of time, the rate of acquisition of vocabulary diminishes and settles for a steady speed. The last factor is IQ. Generally, IQ tests have vocabulary tests as one of their components. It is assumed that the person having more breadth and depth of vocabulary has wider competence to communicate and understand a communication, and therefore he is more intelligent. Mastering vocabulary is a very important part of learning a new language. But a single exposure to new word is often inadequate. It is important to introduce and use words many times in various situations before they become the part of the learner's active vocabulary. Here, it is important to classify vocabulary as active vocabulary and passive vocabulary. The vocabulary used by us while speaking and writing is called active vocabulary or productive vocabulary. Active vocabulary of one person may also differ from that of another person because some words that are frequently used by one person may not be used by another person at all. Similarly, a person's active vocabulary may also depend on his profession. For example, a doctor's active vocabulary is different from that of a lawyer. Thus, active vocabulary may differ from person to person. Words may also pass from a person's passive vocabulary into his active vocabulary. Now let's see what's passive vocabulary. The words whose meaning we can partly understand from the context is called passive vocabulary or recognition vocabulary. We rarely use these words in our own speech or writing, but in a passive sense, we are able to recognize them when we hear or see them. We tend to transfer words from a passive vocabulary to our active vocabulary as our experience widens. Now let us see what problems our learners of English as a second language face when it comes to vocabulary. It is observed that the learners at the undergraduate level usually manage to communicate without making major grammatical mistakes, but their stock of vocabulary often remains limited. Since they have not acquired an adequate stock of vocabulary, they overuse some general words which makes the discourse sound weak, and they are not able to convey different moods or connotation. In simple words, they fail to communicate their intended message precisely. Due to the shortage of vocabulary, the learners have to face two problems. Firstly, on the reception side, they fail to understand any word that falls even slightly outside the passive vocabulary. And secondly, on the production side, they produce very plain utterances that fail to convey the precise meaning. One of the main reasons that leads to this problem is the fact that the learner's active English vocabulary is made up almost entirely of common words that are simplest and most frequently occurring words in English language. It is definitely sensible to learn the common words before the rare ones, but often these words get deeply rooted in the learner's lexicon, and it becomes very difficult to replace these common words with the words that have more specific meaning. Appropriate words are necessary to convey the intended message. The overuse of simple terms can make the adult learner's discourse sound weak. This is particularly an important problem for Indian learners who are learning English as a second language. To solve this problem, a special procedure will be highlighted in the upcoming videos to expand the learner's active vocabulary. The procedure that I will talk about will be more learner-friendly, learner-centered, and effective. The procedure for expanding the learner's active vocabulary will be of special interest to those vocabulary researchers and teachers who have emphasized the role of word consciousness in the process of teaching and learning vocabulary. Dear friends, remember, it is essential to provide the learners with meaningful context for exploration and reinforcement of vocabulary in order to encourage them to become fluent speakers. It is clear that vocabulary is an important component of any language. In order to acquire a satisfactory command over a language, a sufficient stock of vocabulary is essential. The teacher should help the learners to gain mastery over vocabulary. The teacher cannot hope to present the new words so thoroughly that the students will never misuse them, but the teacher can certainly aspire to prevent some of the common errors that most of the learners make. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe, and stay tuned for more upcoming videos.